green. Are you an ultimate Eagles football fan? Well, you're in the right place. This is Birds 365, hosted by the new Mac and Mac, Jody McDonald and John McMullen.
Here we go.
Who collectively have covered and talked about more than 50 plus years of Eagles football. Kick off your day with Birds 365. You'll get debate.
We love to argue.
You'll get the real story from inside the locker room. And you'll hear from some of the great football minds from around the region. You're about to become an Eagles insider. Get in the game. Join Jody Mack and Johnny Mack and join the football community that flocks to Birds 365. Birds 365 starts right now.
Welcome to the NFL. Let's go. Yes, it is a football Friday. Kicking off a weekend here on Birds 365. Thanks for streaming in early with us. You got your MAGA Mac guys, John McMullen and Jody McDonald. JM, since about half the National Football League, I think it's 15 teams, had some kind of workout this week, mandatory minicamp, optional minicamp, OTA, call it what you want. About 15 out of the 32 teams were working this week. One of the 17 was not, is the Philadelphia Eagles, who are done with their off-season activities until training camp rolls around next month. So since the Eagles aren't actually gathering as a group, they're not actually working on anything football-related, we are left talking about word marks. That the Philadelphia Eagles changed their quote-unquote word mark. And if you didn't understand what word mark meant before yesterday, join the club, because I had no idea that's what you called the way that you stylistically put a team's name on a logo. The Eagles decided to change their word mark.
They dropped that on us. Oof.
That's huge. You and I discussed, I remember when the story broke that the Eagles would in the future be returning to their Kelly Green. And I'm a fan of the Kelly Green, and I was happy for it. And you were kind of nonplussed that you don't watch uniform, you don't care about uniforms, you care about football and not what color or what the team is wearing when they're making these plays on Sundays. I'm guessing you have the same feeling about the Eagles with a new word mark.
Unbelievable. So many people so upset. By the way, the Dallas Cowboys, we'll get into that. They got fined for being too physical at minicamp.
The polar opposite of the Philadelphia Eagles, yes.
But as far as the word mark goes, I mean, go win 13 games. You could win a clown nose. Who gives a you-know-what? First of all, it's a merchandise grab. It's always a merchandise grab. I joked about it with the Washington football team when Daniel Snyder was finally forced to change the name from the Redskins. And there's this whole, we need time. We need time. I said right away, no, they're going to double dip from a merchandising standpoint, and they're going to wait and do the Washington football team. By the way, I thought it should have been Washington Football Club going the soccer route. I think it would have worked better. But nonetheless, from a marketing standpoint, and it worked for them and their little fiefdom for the people that are left because of all the disgraceful things he does that are far more important. You got all these people for 2 years buying Washington football team gear, and then you go, oh, hey, by the way, we're gonna rebrand to the Commanders, because it took them 2 years to figure out the command. That's so important to whittle that down, to make that decision. And obviously, when you have an entrenched and no one's gonna protest Eagles, who knows in the future? To be honest.
Be careful. Be careful what you say, Johnny Mac.
I know. Who knows in the future at this point, because people will protest anything. But
endangered species, I can see it.
Exactly. For now, though, there's no issue. So you can't change the nickname or anything of that nature. So what do? You change the jerseys, the logos. And one of the things I've never understood about the NFL, to be honest, is why didn't they adopt the college method where, Nike University, other people call it Oregon, but I call it Nike University. I mean, they just change their uniforms whenever they want, and they show up and they sell more jerseys, and then they change them again. I'm surprised we haven't gotten to that point. But yeah, I mean, I think you told me the story last time we were arguing about the Kelly Green. You were telling me, not arguing, but talking about it. I think you had Ruben on, was it? And you asked him the question.
Ruben Franks told me on WIP. He said, Jody, for all the games I've covered, all the years I've been doing it, I never noted in my own mind, and they wore this uniform. After the game, I've never once thought about the uniform that they were wearing.
Couldn't tell you 5 minutes after the game. I'm exactly the same way. Couldn't tell you. I can't tell you how many fans contact me during the week and say, you know what the Eagles are wearing this week? And I don't want to be mean, but I don't give a flying flip. So no, I don't. I don't care. And the minute the game is over, if you ask me what color jersey were they wearing, I probably aren't going to be able to tell you because I'm literally not paying attention. So I get it from a merchandising standpoint, and fans want to buy the new stuff, and that's exactly what they're going for. And they can complain about it and say they want, but you know what? They're going to buy it. So that's why they do things like this.
Well, I think I'm a little bit more in tuned or moved or motivated than you are. That's a rather low bar that I have to get over, as a matter of fact. Here's the key for me and the key for the Eagles if they're making this decision based on Joseph Anthony Aloysius McDonald Jr. Am I more likely to go out and buy any new Eagle stuff? And when I say stuff, that includes T-shirts, hats, can openers, cups, whatever paraphernalia, whatever merchandise you can slap a logo on. Will I be moved or motivated to go out and get a new one with the new word mark that says Eagles in a slightly different design because it's new? Absolutely not. The next time I buy some Eagle merchandise, it'll be because I need some new Eagle merchandise, not because they've changed the look or the design or the word mark or whatever. No, it's not a big enough deal for me to go, I need to go out and get myself a new whatever it is that I'm looking to purchase. I'm not going to throw out my old one because, oh my God, they've got a new. No, it's perfectly fine. If it's still doing what it's supposed to be doing, if it's a bottle opener, it's still opening my beer bottles, I'm going to continue to use it. I'm not going to throw it away. Now, John, as you've already noted, you get correspondence via email or text or tweet or whatever way that people reach out to get John McMullen's information or opinion. Oh, there are people that are. There are people that will go out sometime within the next week to get their new Eagles bottle opener because it's got a new word mark on it. And God bless the Eagles. They're going to make more money on it because of it. Not you, not me. We're not going to be moved by it, but I'm also not going to lose my mind. And our buddy BLG, Brennan Lee Gouton, put up a poll on his site. Do you like it? 88% don't like it. Other places have commentary there.
And they're all going to buy it, by the way.
It's a travesty.
Yeah.
It's a disgrace. And really, it's a travesty and a disgrace.
No,
it's
people don't like
different
change.
Phrasing of the same exact thing. They just changed the design around a little bit.
Yeah. I think it's more of a subconscious thing. You're talking about, is it going to make you go out and buy something new? But I think, it becomes, all right, let's say for a T-shirt argument, and your buddy, and you're apt to buy those things, and your buddy has it at the first game and you don't have it, you have the old one. It's almost like, a subconscious peer pressure thing. You want the new. You want.
Huh?
Yeah. You want the currents. Yeah, I remember. I think the best logo. It's always Charles Barkley, because he's, I always joke that Charles could be a stand-up comedian if he wasn't a basketball player back in the day. But when the Sixers changed their logo back to, if you go back to the Julius Erving sort of traditional look, which is the look that I like. Yeah, generally that's how it works. You grow up on a team and that's what you like. And they changed it to this garish thing. And Barkley said, I think they gave my daughter some crayons and that's what she came up with. It was awful. It was hideous. Now I saw it. This is interesting because long before the Eagles changed their word mark, I saw one of those stupid Twitter things. Who do you remember when you see this classic logo? And it was this ugly Sixers logo that at the time I thought was just the most disgraceful thing in the history of mankind, that Charles Barkley on the team was joking about at the time and how ugly it was. And now people look at it and say, oh, there's a little bit of nostalgia there, and say, oh, look at that logo. You'll get used to it. Don't worry about it. Wait a week or two. You'll get used to it. It's not that big of a deal.
It isn't that even that big a change. Basically, the wings go out or the wings go in. That's the change.
Yeah.
Last time I checked, and man, if they ever tried to change this, Eagles is spelled Eagles. You know how many people would be thrown off if they had to learn a new song with new spell? Oh my God. You talk about making a change. Change the spelling of Eagles, and you really could throw the entire Delaware Valley into a tizzy. No, it really isn't that big a deal. And some people are going to make it out to be a big deal.
It's fine. And I've always said there's certain teams, that have these story traditions and are never going to change much. Locally, probably the biggest one would be Penn State, which is obviously kind of dull and bland. If you look at it from a current perspective, everybody wants splashy. And as I said, Oregon, and they're never going to change because it's Penn State and they've built up that tradition. And, professional sports, probably in football, it's, you're always going to have the star. Eagles fans aren't going to like that, but because
that is probably the most iconic NFL logo, is it not?
Oh yeah, by far. It's the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, it is what it is. It's the most. There are certain teams, it's the Yankees in baseball, it's the Celtics in basketball, it's the Cowboys in football. Probably, I guess, not a hockey guy, but I assume the Canadians in hockey. That those are the teams. Those are when you think those particular sports, those are the first teams that come out of people's mouths, and they don't have to change. Other teams have to change. I don't think the Eagles have to change, to be honest, but who knows why they do the things they do.
Well, I think we both know, because they can get, I'll say there's one born every 20 minutes, suckers to buy into the new stuff just because they can. And yeah, it does tell you about, I think it says more about the Cowboys than it does about the Eagles, because the Eagles are not alone in continually changing colors.
Oh, uniforms. No. Most teams
they got a lot of company in the NFL. A lot of teams do just that, but the Cowboys don't ever have to change because they landed on the one that has become iconic. Jim, one other note, and again, deep X's and O's football related, not that I do want to bring up before we bring in our first guest. Yesterday, they announced that the World Cup is coming to Philadelphia in 2026. 11 different United States cities as the Cup comes to basically America, North America, South America, Central America, all the Americans. They'll have different games in different locations, and Philadelphia has been selected as one of the 11 cities that will host a World Cup game. Games How big a deal is this? I know that the Eagles know when they can and can't use the field, even though it's 4 years down the road, and they're going to be able to do that. How many games do you think are actually going to be in the home of the Philadelphia Eagles?
That we need Kevin Kincaid for, because he's the soccer guy. I'm
That's
not
true.
sure how
Oh,
it
he's
works.
such a soccer geek.
Yeah. I'll have to ask Kevin about that. I'm not, and I didn't. I assume there's not going to be any major issues. I mean, they work out these things years in advance, and the Eagles are on board, obviously. It's funny because the Eagles kind of run that place. I mean, even though there's public money involved, when you see a concert, the Eagles are sort of running it, and their PR people are doing all this stuff. And same thing will happen with the World Cup.
It's announced immediately on PhiladelphiaEagles.com.
Yeah. So they're very well aware of the dates and all that kind of thing, but I'm not as well versed on the World Cup as some other people. And yeah, maybe we'll get Kevin on because he'll know that exactly. He'll have that locked down.
We do need Kincaid. Again, better question, better asked of him than you, but I'm going to ask it to you because you're here with me now. What does playing an international soccer game do to the field at Lincoln Financial Field? Because they share it with Temple, and some Sundays after Saturday when Temple's home, there's usually one or two crossovers, and you can tell the difference when they play on it the next day. Is there any?
Yeah, there is. They've played a lot of soccer games there already, international friendlies, as they call them. They've had a lot of games there over the years, and CONCACAF, which is sort of what goes up to the World Cup, the North American version. They posted a lot of things. And as you mentioned, Temple football in those concerts, they have some Coldplay was just there. I think Kenny Chesney's coming up. Can tear up the field. That's part of it. And what you got to deal with. I mean, that's kind of baked into it because you have these big stadiums and, more so the newer ones than and Lincoln Financial Field is still a very nice stadium, but when you see the new ones pop up like SoFi Stadium and they, spent almost $6 billion on it, and you see how quickly things become outdated. And I say to myself, they're playing 8 games. 10 potentially if you're talking preseason. Then you might go to the playoffs if you win the Super Bowl like the Rams and have a couple more. But I mean, you got a $6 billion stadium for a max of 12, 13 dates. No, you got to get the Kenny Chesneys of the world, the Coldplays of the world, and all that stuff in there. So it's just something you have to deal with.
And we will deal with it in 2026 when the World Cup comes to Philly for. How many games? I don't know. McMullen doesn't know. I guess we'll have to get Kincaid on. Well, maybe our next guest will know. I know he's great at the NFL. I know he's a basketball guy, too. I don't know if he's any kind of
Steph Curry, baby.
Yes, Steph looked pretty good last night. Congrats to the Warriors. Jared Dubin from CBSSports.com, NFL writer and NBA fan. We'll stick with football today with Jared. Jared, he joins us next here on Birds 365.
Go for the poles and the pools. Go for the oohs and the ahs. Go for the bubbles and the bubbly. Go for the story and the stories. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
On the field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you. Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass, free.
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
At Action News, we cherish every moment, and it's our profound responsibility to bring you closer to your world. Never miss a moment. Trust the people at Action News.
All right, did you know I was the Mommy Slam Dunk Champion?
Really?
Yes, really, don't sound so surprised.
Let's see it.
Oh, you're ready. All right, here we go. Let's hear the crowd. So go to right, go to left, fake 'em out. Mama, go up, up, up.
She did it.
Again? You can't avoid gravity, but United Healthcare can help you avoid financial surprises by helping you compare costs and doctor quality ratings. United Healthcare.
Uh-huh. Go for the midnight dares. Go for the game. Go for the hits. Go for the fans. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
You got your Mega Mac guys here on Birds 365. Kind of a downtime, so we're looking for insight anywhere we can find it. Oh, we found a good spot today. I've had him on my CBS Sports radio show on the weekends. He is an excellent NFL reporter of CBSSports.com. Jared Dubin, good enough to give us a couple of minutes of his time today. Jared, you got the Mega Mac guy, John McMullen and Jody McDonald here. How's your summer going?
It's going all right. How about you guys?
It's going well, Jared. I guess I wanted to start. I thought it was an interesting angle you did recently on CBS, ranking the NFL's top 10 duos. And I thought it was interesting for a couple of reasons. One, number one on your list, I'll tell people, was Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, which I think, a lot of people are going to agree with. So you have coach, you have quarterback, which is maybe the most obvious. But then number two was Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey of the Rams, the Super Bowl champions. So you went a different route with it. It's not just coach and quarterback. It could be any duos in the entire NFL. Now, here in Philadelphia, where we're based, the Eagles have been on a lot of top 10 lists, a lot of hype for this particular team. None of their duos made your top 10 list. And by the way, I'm not disagreeing with you. But I'm interested to see what your duo would be, what your top duo would be for the Philadelphia Eagles.
I think probably A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, right? Like that's the basis.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Be the best part of their offense. I mean, you can make an argument for going with the two tackles or one of the tackles and Jason Kelce or Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham. Like there are different ways you could go about it. I think if they're going to be as good as they want to be this year, though, then that receiver duo has to really take, a big step and be one of the better receiving duos in the league.
All right, everybody's got an opinion on Eagles quarterback, and it will help determine how big a season the Eagles have for sure. We know how important quarterback is in the game in the National Football League. Give us your read on Jalen Hurts. Capable of stepping up and becoming a better quarterback, leveled off, he is what he is. Everything else has to work around him. Where do you think the future is headed with Jalen Hurts as the quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles?
I think he's definitely capable of stepping up. We just have to see him do it, be more consistent as a passer in like the short and intermediate areas. I think he's done well getting the ball down the field and obviously making plays outside of structure with his legs and obviously contributing in, the design run game and making the running backs more efficient behind what's been a really good offensive line. But I think we saw last year when they tried to be a pass-heavy offense for the first portion of the season, that didn't really work out too well for them. And it wasn't until they centered the offense around more of the run game, not just including Hurts, but also the running backs, that their offense really took off. And that's good. You're not going to be the 2019 Ravens every year efficiency-wise, though. So you do need to have, an efficient and explosive pass offense. They need to get better in those areas. And obviously that falls for the most part on him.
So I want to reverse course a little bit. And you talked about A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. On paper, a very good duo. And that hasn't been the case for a number of years at receiver for the Eagles. But I talk about it all the time on this show, Jared. You need a vehicle to get you the football as a receiver. How much can a receiver help a quarterback as opposed to the quarterback helping the receiver?
I think it's a mutually beneficial relationship, ideally, right? And I think it also involves the play caller, because you got to be able to scheme your guys open, scheme easy throws for your quarterback, and then on the plays where somebody's not open, you get them the ball anyway, and that guy can take off, run after catch. I think we've seen AJ Brown obviously do a great deal of that so far in his career. He's one of the better run after catch guys in the league, and I think Devontae Smith showed the ability last year to get open down the field no matter what the coverage is. And that's going to be, I would imagine, his role within that duo is going to be more of the field stretching guy, and AJ Brown will be the guy who's doing more of, obviously he can get down the field quite well himself, but I would imagine that more of the underneath and run after catch stuff is going to be him, just because body type wise and demeanor wise, it fits him a little bit better.
Jared, one of the reasons why I like having guys like yourself on, someone who can take a step back from the Philadelphia perspective, look from a national perspective, is sometimes we just get so ingrained we miss the forest through the trees, like with Nick Sirianni. Hey, playoffs his first year. True, but they were 9-8 and they got their tails kicked by Tampa in the first round of the playoffs. Hey, they were 4-11 and they were 4-12 and they won a. Yeah, but you beat a bunch of third-string quarterbacks along the way last year. So, yes, there are the positives and there are negatives, and people usually get to the diametrically opposite ends depending on whether they're optimists or pessimists. Give us the removed from Philadelphia perspective of Nick Sirianni. What do you think of him 1 year into his coaching career in the NFL?
Well, I think it's really hard to know what to think of a coach after just 1 year. I think he showed a really good ability to adjust his plan, which is not something you see from a lot of coaches. Like, a lot of coaches would say, my offense isn't working, it's the fault of the players, not me, and I'm not going to change anything. But he changed things, pretty wildly midstream. And that's something that you really like to see from a coach. I think that, Jonathan Gannon's defense, they maybe didn't have necessarily the personnel to do exactly what he wanted to do last year. I think, that was part of why they went out and got, some more defensive backs this offseason. Obviously, bringing in James Bradbury, I think, will help play the style of defense they wanted to. But showing an ability to adjust is one of the most important things that a coach can do, adjust specifically to his personnel. And he did that. So to me, that's an encouraging sign for the future, and I think that that's more important looking forward than necessarily what they did last year, whether it was going 9-8 or making the playoffs or getting their butts kicked in the playoffs. Like, the idea that he is willing to cater his offense to what he actually has on his team, to me, is a good sign for what he'll be.
You mentioned play calling a little bit before, Jared. And Nick, part of that adjustment last year was Nick stepping back from the play calling aspect, giving it over to Shane Steichen. That's going to continue this season. It's interesting to me when a young coach does that. And people in New York, I don't think it's official yet, but the thought is that Brian Daboll is not going to call the plays and Mike Kafka is probably going to call the plays. We'll see how that works out. When you see a young coach who's brought in as a play caller, offensive mind, traditionally, you think about the Sean McVays of the world, the Kyle Shanahans, who are sort of the top tier younger coaches that everybody wants to copy. And then you see guys saying, I don't have to call plays. Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it's different for every coach, right? I don't think Sirianni was calling plays in Indianapolis. Frank Reich was calling the plays. So last year was the change for him was calling the plays, So now going back to not doing it and taking more of the, holistic responsibility over the entire team, maybe that's just more comfortable for him. Obviously, Daboll's been calling plays the last few years in Buffalo. I think he called plays when he was at Alabama back in the day. But if he feels that he'll have more of a handle on his team by having Mike Kafka call the plays, like, I would imagine he'll still be obviously heavily involved in the offensive meetings and in crafting the game plan. And, every head coach, no matter what, is on the headset anyway. So he'll be able to be in communication with Kafka if he says, like, we should do this here, then maybe Kafka takes that into consideration. It doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to not be involved in the offense at all. And it's the same thing I would imagine for Sirianni. It's not like he doesn't have his hands on the offense. It's just somebody else relaying the call to the quarterback.
John, I got to get you on the record on something that I saw on CBS this week, and I thought was fun and debatable. 4 top young quarterbacks in the AFC: Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, and Joe Burrow, who only went to the Super Bowl last year. All really good, all really young. Who would you want to be your quarterback for the next 4-year decade or so? My answer would be yes, 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 and yes. Wouldn't mind having any of them, but if you had to put them in an order, Mahomes, Burrow, Herbert, Allen, what order would you rank those 4 guys for the next decade?
By the way, if I can't have any of those guys, I'll take Lamar Jackson. Thank you very much. I would take Mahomes first. I think we've seen the highest level of play out of him and the most consistency out of him. Obviously, he had the few games last year where that entire offense was kind of in a funk, but even in a down year, he was still one of the 2 or 3 best quarterbacks in the entire league, and we haven't seen him really be any worse than that for an extended period of time. So, yeah, I'll take that guy. It's really tough after that between Allen and Herbert for me. Allen is just such a terrific overall playmaker. Like, I think if you're just talking about throwing the ball accurately and efficiently, Herbert is probably better than Allen at that. But Allen does so much with his legs and is such a great outside of structure playmaker that it makes it a really tough decision. Sorry, there was just something flying in front of my screen right there. And now my dog has decided he wants to join because anytime I'm talking to anyone who's not in the room, he's a little bit confused.
Yeah, there we go. What's the dog's name? We're both dog people, so my dog's always in.
Hi, Bodie.
Yeah. Say hello. Making the Birds 365 debut, both of you.
So, yeah, I'd go Mahomes, and then a really tough decision between Allen or Herbert. And it's not a slight, I don't think, to say to Joe Burrow, like, maybe he's not quite as good as those guys. It's like
everybody's going to take it as a slight, though.
Top 5 or 6 quarterback in the league instead of a top 2 or 3 quarterback in the league. Like, they're all obviously, like you said, really, really good.
Yeah, everybody takes everything as a slight. If you say somebody's second behind Patrick Mahomes, that's not a slight, or third or fourth. I'm a Justin Herbert guy after Patrick Mahomes, and I'm sort of blinded by him. When I watch him play, I said, "All right, that's it. I want this guy." And you kind of get caught in that sometimes. But there's one even younger quarterback who hasn't done much yet that I wanted to talk to you about, and that's Trevor Lawrence, because, boy, I mean, the skill set, and people would talk, this is the best quarterback prospect since maybe Andrew Luck, maybe Peyton Manning. Some people went all the way back to John Elway. That didn't change in a year, but obviously he was in a very bad situation with a poor organization, a bad head coach. Now Doug Peterson is there. We're very familiar with here in Philadelphia. He won a Super Bowl. Where are you on Trevor Lawrence? Are you totally turned off by that rookie season, or you still think he's got that enormous upside?
I think he's still got the enormous upside. I think that the numbers paint a worse picture of how he played last year than the tape does. He made, like, you look at his interceptions, I think he had like 17 interceptions or something like that, and 12 or 13 of them came when the team was trailing, and a lot of them came when they were trailing big. He got more aggressive when he needed to try to get his team back into the game, and I don't think he had the personnel around him to be put in position to succeed, and certainly he didn't have the coaching to be put in position to succeed. So I'm still very high on him. Obviously, the first year was not encouraging for what you want to see from a rookie quarterback, but I think it's important to remember that most rookie quarterbacks are bad, and most of them are really bad. So having a bad season on tape is not necessarily the end of the world. It's not every year that we see somebody do, what Herbert did during his rookie season. That's not the typical path for even the best quarterbacks, they're usually not really good as rookies. So we want to see him obviously take a big step forward this year and then big steps forward in the future. But I don't think that not playing particularly well as a rookie should completely change your mind. It's not like, to me at least, he was looking totally lost out there. He just, put the ball in danger more often than you'd like to see, but I think did so for the reason that he was trying to get his team back in the game and make, Superman style plays, as opposed to like, I can't make the reads or I don't know where to go with the ball or things like that.
All right, Jared, let me ask you about another very talented AFC quarterback who we haven't mentioned yet, and we've already mentioned a bunch. And that's the starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. Or will he be? The Deshaun Watson story seems to take twists and turns every single week. And before you know it, week 1 in the National Football League is going to be here. Is Deshaun Watson, when is Roger Goodell going to come up with a punishment? Because it'll be appealed and then they'll have to go through another process. We assume the Browns are going to have to pay a price for giving a $230 million all-guaranteed contract to a guy who has as many legal issues as Deshaun Watson has. Just give us your best case scenario and guess on what the time frame is going to look like for Deshaun Watson and the Browns this season.
The thing is, there's really no way to know because the NFL has no consistency on how it handles personal conduct issues from case to case. Goodell, or now I guess the independent punisher or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
They're not tied to any precedent. They can hand down whatever punishment they want for whatever reason they want. Like that's what's in the CBA. And obviously Goodell, and it's also been ruled that way by the courts, by the way. They can hand down whatever punishment they want for whatever reason they want. And Goodell now is handling the appeals. And they've shown no consistency from case to case in terms of what the punishment is going to be, when that punishment is going to be handed down, whether or not they'll explain what their punishment is, if there's going to be a report on what they're investigating. Like, there's just absolutely no way to know. So I might as well pick out of a hat when I say what my guess is.
By the way, it's so interesting because the new CBA, I don't know what the NFLPA is thinking when it comes to personal conduct, but they complained for years that Roger Goodell was the judge, jury, and executioner. And as you mentioned, Jared, they set up this new system where there's an independent sort of arbiter or judge, whatever. It's going to be Sue Robinson, I think is her name. But then if the NFL doesn't like it, or the NFLPA, but more importantly, the NFL, they can appeal. And as you mentioned, it has to go to the appeal, and the appeals officer is Roger Goodell or somebody that Roger Goodell designates. So what really changed? Because they can go through this layer and say, okay, Sue Robinson gives Deshaun Watson 12 games. We don't like that. Let's appeal. And then it goes back in the hands of Roger Goodell. Now, I don't think that's going to happen because of public perception, but I bring this up for the more mundane, I don't want to call them mundane, but guys who are in trouble for other reasons that aren't going to be as high profile. It's still in Roger Goodell's hands. What the heck is the NFLPA thinking with this system?
I think there will be an appeal, by the way, by the NFLPA, regardless of optics, because it's, regardless of how it looks, it is the Players Association's job to lobby for every player that's in the Players Association. Yeah. So I would imagine that, as gross as it may make some people feel, myself included, I would imagine that there will be an appeal no matter what the suspension is that comes down. And it's going to be quite the optics, like you guys said. As far as what the NFLPA is thinking, I think that this is viewed as a small step in the direction that they wanted to go from where it was in the last CBA. I wouldn't think that this is the ending point that they want to be at. And, when the next CBA negotiation comes around, they'll try to change it again. And when the next commissioner comes around, they'll try to change it again. But I don't think that they were going to get – go ahead, bud. I don't think they were going to get discipline completely out of the commissioner's hands after how much control he had over it in the previous CBA. So I don't think it was ever particularly realistic that that was going to happen. So getting him at least to not be the one that was handing the punishment down and hearing the appeal, I think was a small step for them, and they'll, deal with whatever they want to get next the next time it comes around.
I would need your take on another AFC quarterback. We're kind of stuck in an AFC quarterback loop here. And that's the guy you mentioned earlier, an MVP. That would be the starting quarterback of the Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Jackson. Interesting day yesterday. Continually reported that the Ravens and Lamar had not advanced conversations on him signing an extension in Baltimore. Most people reporting that it's because Lamar doesn't want to be bothered, that he's his own agent. He is not pressed and pushed the Ravens for this. The Ravens at least are leaking information that they're willing to pay him commensurate rate with a guy who's already won an MVP. Yesterday he said, I've talked to the Ravens, surprise, surprise, and also asked, is there a possibility you could go to a holdout if you don't get a deal done before the season started? And he didn't dismiss it. Kind of a different perspective breaking out of Ravens camp yesterday. How much is this going to affect the Ravens? Are they looking at a potential holdout? Because if it does, it could derail their entire season.
Yeah, I don't think so. He didn't have to go to OTAs because that didn't affect his money. If he misses mini camp, training camp, anything like that, he's not getting paid. And I think that's changed things over the past couple of years. And I think especially for your quarterback, not having him in training camp obviously is a huge problem. I just don't think there's necessarily any urgency to get a deal done, right now, because you look at quarterback contracts, they're only going up. And, you look at the history of quarterbacks that don't get the deal done when they want it to happen, but they're good enough that their team wants to keep them. They get a whole lot of money. Look what happened to Kirk Cousins. Look what happened to Dak Prescott. Barring a, career-ending injury, Lamar Jackson is going to get paid on an enormous contract at some point within the next few years. Even if he suffers a season-ending injury, look at Dak. He, messed up his ankle and still got all that money right after. And, now that contract is a bargain for the Cowboys now. He's the seventh highest paid quarterback in the league at this point now. Salaries are going to keep going up. Bodie. Salaries are going to keep going up. He's going to get paid. The later he signs, the more money he's going to get, I would imagine, barring, like I said, a career-ending injury. So, I don't necessarily know if there's urgency for him to get it done immediately. Obviously, it's better to lock in that guaranteed money for the future. But if he can say, we'll give you, a shorter deal, fully guaranteed, you could hit free agency again before you turn 30 or something along those lines, maybe that's something that gets him to do it right away. But I don't necessarily think that he needs to have it before this season starts, because the money will be there no matter what for me.
Jared Dubin, follow him on Twitter at JADubin5. You can read his NFL work at CBSSports.com. If you want to read his NBA work, a lot of that at 538.com. You can read about Steph Curry, who is officially, I think we could stamp an all-time great. He should have been there, but obviously kind of sealed and validated that more last night. Since we're talking about AFC quarterbacks, I guess I'll end it there, but I'm also going to bring in an NFC team. We already talked about Deshaun Watson. Deshaun's going to get suspended. Might be 6 games, 12 games, might be a full year. Who knows? Baker Mayfield. If you're the Cleveland Browns, Jared, you just say, all right, well, just keep Baker just in, while we're waiting for Deshaun Watson. Conversely, in Carolina, Matt Rule is coaching for his job, so to speak. And, he's paying all this lip service that we have to get Sam Darnold ready. They were in the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes, maybe harder than anybody else. They were in day one. They never left. They were trying to get Deshaun Watson. They know they need an upgrade. Baker Mayfield's an upgrade over Sam Darnold. What do you think is going to happen with Baker Mayfield?
I mean, I would imagine he'll get traded at some point. I can't see the Browns just straight up cutting him. Like that money is going to be on their books if they cut him. It's guaranteed. They might as well say, we'll give some team a 4th round pick so we can only take half the money on our books instead. Something along those lines. Like there's no reason to just cut him, and he is worth at least something. I think that teams are angry with the Browns over the way that Watson's contract was structured and aren't going to be looking to do them any favors. And obviously Baker has, a significant salary that isn't something, and he's not, I don't think, good enough that you can say, we're going to give you a 2nd round pick and we're going to take all the money. Like, I don't think that's necessarily going to happen. I think maybe you get a late round pick and the team will take all the money, or maybe you can pay them with a pick and they'll take most of the money or something along those lines. But I don't think that they can really keep him on the team this year. I think that's a recipe for internal disaster.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I don't think he can go back into that locker room. And oh, by the way, McMullen, Matt Corral could be starting quarterback for those Carolina Panthers before the year is out.
Well, good luck, Matt Roll, on that one.
Yeah, sometimes rookies step in and play well. Then again, we saw what happened in Jacksonville last year, so it is a little difficult. But want to get your take on the NFC East, Jared. A lot of people here in Philadelphia believe the Eagles have pulled even with the Cowboys. Some think they've actually stuck their nose in front and are ahead of the Cowboys in the division. But almost everybody believes it's Eagles and Cowboys, and then it's Commanders and Giants. How big is the separation between the top 2 teams and the bottom 2 teams in the NFC East?
I think it's real, but not necessarily huge. I think we saw last year that those were pretty clearly the best 2 teams in the division, and I don't think that much of what's happened this offseason has changed that. I think that maybe the Giants with their 2 top 10 draft picks, should take a step forward in getting better coaching, certainly on offense than they had the last couple of years. You would imagine that that their offense will get quite a bit better. I don't think Carson Wentz is the answer. We've seen the last couple of years exactly why that's the case. You guys are very familiar in Philadelphia why that's not necessarily the case. I think that Dallas and Philly are the 2 best teams. And which one you think is better, I think depends on the way that you view football, to me. If you're thinking like, the Eagles have the better offensive line at this point. They have the better defensive line at this point. They probably have, a deeper roster at this point because the Cowboys tend to be pretty top heavy. Then you're probably going to lean towards Philly. And if you're one of the people who think, I'll take the team with the better quarterback or the better offense, then you're going to think it's Dallas. I tend to be in the latter camp for the most part. Like last year when we did our division predictions at CBS, everybody had Washington winning the NFC East, and I had the Cowboys because they had the best quarterback in the division. And that obviously worked out pretty well for me. It's one of the few things I've been right about over the years. I'll take my plaudits for it. And, I think that certainly, Dak Prescott has shown more during his career than Jalen Hurts has. Some of that is because he's been in the league for longer. I think that, we saw at the beginning of last year when it seemed like he was pretty healthy. He was back playing at an extremely high level. And then when he got that calf injury against the Patriots over the rest of the year, he wasn't running and he wasn't really even throwing on the run. He had to come to a full stop before, he would throw from outside the pocket, and he wasn't getting rid of the ball quick enough with that offensive line. I think that the injury affected him over the second half of the year. He's now able to go through a full offseason this year. He's not rehabbing from anything. He's been full go since the start of minicamp, and I think that that'll do, really well for the Cowboys offense, which, because of the personnel changes they've had, needs him to play better than he did in that second half of the season. They don't have Lyle Collins anymore. They don't have Amari Cooper anymore. They're not going to have Michael Gallup, I would imagine, for at least some of the season. So he needs to be more consistent like he was, in the first half of last season, as opposed to what we saw after that calf injury.
All right. That lends me to one last question. If you believe he with the best quarterback wins, How would you rank the AFC South going into this year?
AFC South. I mean, I guess it's the Titans and Colts at the top of the division again, just because that's the way it's been over the last few years. And, you know, Trevor Lawrence, I think, has the potential to be the best quarterback in the division. We obviously haven't seen that yet. It's a tough call for me between Matt Ryan and Ryan Tannehill. You know, Ryan took, I thought, a pretty significant step back last year, but I don't know how much of that was the infrastructure around him in terms of their offensive line and really having no playmakers other than Kyle Pitts. You know, he's certainly going to have a better offensive line this season, maybe not necessarily a left tackle where he's going from Jake Matthews to, I think, your old friend Matt Pryor, but the rest of the offensive line is, you know, a lot better. And he's got Michael Pittman there, and they drafted Alec Pierce, and he's got Jonathan Taylor. Like, he's going to be in better position to succeed this year than he was last year. And I think the opposite might be true for Ryan Tannehill. You know, they don't have A.J. Brown anymore. Their offensive line is not as good as it was a couple of years ago. And obviously Derrick Henry coming off a significant foot injury. And for a guy that big, I think a foot injury is a big problem. You know, he seems like this indestructible guy. And over the last few years, it really did look that way. Like you just couldn't do anything to him no matter what. But, you know, a guy carrying that much weight, having a foot injury is a problem. There's a lot of stress on that foot when he changes directions, a lot of torque given the way that he moves around. So long way of saying I don't really know. It's
that's why I asked the question, because I don't know either, because there isn't a standout choice in that division, which should make it very competitive this year.
Yeah.
Jared, now that you've enlightened our listeners, lighten the load on Bodie. Get him outside. Get him out for a run.
By the way, Bodie, is that what is the Patrick Swayze? Is that related to what movie?
No, it's from The Wire.
Okay, there we go. That makes more sense, because
Very
I thought you're too young to go.
Yeah, he's a youngster, McMullen. I know the reference you're making. He's younger than both of us.
I'm not that young anymore.
Like it either way. Jared, great stuff. Appreciate you coming on board. We'll certainly get you back on again before the season gets underway.
Thanks for having me, guys. Have a good weekend.
Thanks,
Jared Dubin covers the entire National Football League.
Why can't I think of the name of that movie?
Yes, Point Break.
Point Break. Thank you, Jody.
Yeah, Bodie was in Point Break, but he was also in The Wire.
Yeah.
Jared's got a couple of years on us. He's a little bit younger, so he'd lean Wire over Point Break.
Which makes sense. Yeah.
You and I know both. We've been around for a while. All right, we'll stick around for a while. Still got plenty yet to do. You've got John McMullen and Jody McDonald. Oh, we got a good guest coming in hour number 2. We'll go more Eagles specific with our buddy Marcus Hayes from the Inquirer and WIP. He'll join us next hour here on Birds 365.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
7 on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
At Action News, we cherish every moment, and it's our profound responsibility to bring you closer to your world. Never miss a moment. Trust the people at Action News.
In Philadelphia, we celebrated the miracle with pride only 5 years ago. And then the following morning, IBEW Local 98 members went back to work, building this city, rescuing our communities from decay, and inspiring the young men and women of the region to take pride in who we are. Like the Cats, Local 98 members believe in hope.
To learn more about who we are, what we do, and career opportunities with Local 98, visit us, IBEW98.org.
All right, did you know I was the Mommy Slam Dunk Champion?
Really?
Yes, really don't sound so surprised.
Let's see it.
Oh, you're ready. All right, here we go. Let's hear the crowd. Go to right, go to left, fake 'em out. Mama, go up, up, up.
She did it.
Again? You can't avoid gravity, but United Healthcare can help you avoid financial surprises by helping you compare costs and doctor quality ratings. United Healthcare.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass, free.
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Go for the midnight dares. Go for the game. Go for the hits. Go for the fans. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
John McMullen. I would be Jody McDonald. That would make this Maga Mac hanging out on Birds 365, a football Friday. Next hour, we'll get Marcus Hayes from the Philadelphia Inquirer and WIP Doppelboard and talk all things Eagles with us. J-Mac, when is tight end U supposed to take place? Do you know off the top of your head?
Yeah, it's next week. I don't know the exact dates. I think what's today's date? I think it's next Wednesday through Friday.
Okay. Today's 17th.
Yeah, I think it's next Wednesday. I think it starts.
All right. Running the risk of being the angry, cranky old man with the get off my lawn attitude. I will share with you my thoughts on tight end U, but I want to get yours first. What do you think of some of the best tight ends in the National Football League getting together, working out, sharing beliefs and things that make them good? What are your thoughts on it other than it's a good photo op and you get to expand your brand when you get things like this? Because believe me when I tell you, there will be many a media outlet down there to cover it.
I think I know where you're going, but I don't think there's that much opportunity over 3 days to do that much. I do think it's tight end university is not the first, really. And I think what started it all was Von Miller's pass rushing camp. And then came Lane Johnson's offensive line masterminds, tight end university. There's some other ones. Those are probably the most famous ones. And they all came out of, partially the offseason because you got to work in the offseason now. You're left to your own devices. So the good players understand they have to figure out ways to get better on their own. So I think from that perspective, it's a really good thing. I do think if you can pick the brain of Travis Kelce and George Kittle and Greg Olsen and Dallas Goedert is going to be there, that's a good thing. If you're another tight end, the old school mentality of, why you commiserating with the enemy. It's a different
that's
world.
Where I'm going.
Yeah, it's a different world. It's a different world. And every position does it, not just tight ends. So, I mean, I'm an old school guy too, Jody, but you either adapt or you get left behind. If you're sitting on the couch, I always, and I think there's a whole cocktail of things that led to Carson Wentz's descent as a player. I won't say downfall because he's still a starting quarterback, but he's not what he once was. I think we could all agree with that. And most of it, and I think, it's hard to put percentages on things, but I think most of it is related to injuries, no question about it. And it's not only the knee, but the back and the concussion and everything else. But I do think people, 2017, and this is why the Eagles sent Jalen Hurts to Tom House and Adam Day do. That's what they did with Carson Wentz coming off his rookie season. And he was better mechanically that year. And that was it. Stop doing it. Now, part of it was because of injuries, and it was always rehabbing. Then COVID happened, and I don't know what Carson did during COVID. I think he just stayed home, and all of a sudden the mechanics started going backwards again, and it's something you need to, especially when it's not natural for you, you need to keep on top of it. I always thought that was an underreported aspect of his descent. And it's a long way of saying you need to figure out ways to be great if you want to be great in the NFL, because you can't do it like you used to be able to do it with your own coaches and your own team. So you got to figure out ways. And once Von Miller opened the door, everybody's like, well, we better, the pass rushers are getting together, figuring out the tricks of the trade. Lane Johnson's said, we better get together and figure out what's going on. And then tight ends did it, and so forth and so on. Quarterbacks are always, there's a certain group of trainers. Footwork, there's footwork guys. The footwork king is kind of famous, but you have to do it. So I don't have a problem with it.
Here's where my problem comes in. Excuse me. Here's where my problem comes in. You were trying to draw a comparison with Carson Wentz going to quote unquote quarterback coaches to keep his mechanics together. I got no issue with that. I got no problem with that. Putting the work in, acknowledging that no one's perfect, even coming off a good year, 2017, like they did in the Super Bowl. Carson may have lightened up on putting extra time in to keep his game at a certain level. Going to a individual coach who is charging, and you're going to have to pay to get their expertise. Oh, I get that. That's should happen. That's something that should be ingrained in every single player. As a group of guys getting together who are already in the league to share secrets among themselves, that makes no sense to me. Your job, your commitment is to the Philadelphia Eagles. If you're a Dallas guy and you're attending that this week, your commitment is to the Eagles. It's not to any other tight end in the league to show off what has made you one of the top 5 tight ends. John McMullen's opinion, Jody McDonald's opinion, maybe not everybody's opinion, but we think he's a top 5 tight end. You don't have to go there and show how you got there to the other tight ends who aren't in the top 5 just yet. That's not your job. You're supposed to keep that information to yourself in-house for the betterment of the Philadelphia Eagles in 2022. Yeah, could he learn a thing or two from Kittle and Kelsey? Yeah, probably. If you're the top banana, and I would make those the top 2, it's only downside. You've already achieved your status. Yeah. You don't have to be sharing the secret sauce with anybody else. No. And I get what you said about it's a brave new world, Jody. Excuse me, there are different ways that players relate to each other. This isn't old school football where you have to hate the opponent. You want to get together with all the other tight ends and have a barbecue and have some cold ones. Yeah, fine. That's okay. I'm not telling you, oh my, you have to spit on the opposing tight end anytime you see him. No, that's old school. That's out the window. They all have agents and they're all free agents. So they change teams or whatever. The 70s mentality of the NFL no longer exists.
No.
That I get. But nowhere does it say you must exchange trade secrets of your position with someone who's going to go out there and try and beat your football team in the upcoming year. Doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's about trade secrets as much as, technique and fundamentals. And, I think it's, if you're like Dallas Goedert isn't Dallas Goedert because he's, perfect with technique and fundamentals. In fact, he drops the ball a little bit too much. He's got to tighten up on that. He's Dallas Goedert because he's 6'5", he's 256. He can run like the wind. He's strong enough to block defensive ends. He can't teach. he can't teach that. Travis Kelce can't teach his athleticism to be, perhaps the best pass catching tight end of all time now. I mean, it's a different era, and obviously the numbers are inflated, but numbers wise, he certainly is. Same thing with George Kittle as far as his physicality. It's more about techniques and fundamentals than, in other words, I think it was, if Dallas Goedert's opening up Nick Sirianni's playbook and say, hey, this is it, that's a problem. I don't think anybody's doing that. It's about getting together and trying to stay. And I always remember when Lane started O-line masterminds, he said that. He specifically brought up Von Miller. He said, well, they're sharing secrets on how they beat us. We better figure out what to do. And it's got more to do with that than sharing. I can't say everybody's not, dumb enough to not share playbooks, but I'm pretty sure nobody's sharing proprietary information.
I'm not even suggesting that someone would do that. And you're probably right. There's probably one guy that accidentally doesn't even know that he's doing it, and he tips his hand and gives something away. I'm not even suggesting that. But how you prepare for a season, what your drills are, what you're doing during the off season, maybe that truly has lifted your game. Maybe someone taught it to you, a coach who you were playing for at the time, high school, college, wherever else, and you have carried that forward, and it's helped to make you a better player in the National Football League. It's something you've been doing as you've developed all through those years. You're not obligated to share that with anybody else on any other team. Keep that to yourself, young man. That's what made you as good as you are.
I think the only difference is the structure. Guys are working out all the time at various performance centers, whether it's Exos, there's a bunch of them in Florida, from different teams. They go to specific trainers because they develop a reputation. I mentioned the Footwork King. He's developed a reputation. He's got players working with him from all over the NFL. They do it on a personal level anyway. So to me, it's just the branding and the structure. The branding's better. They sell some T-shirts. Same thing with Lane, with offensive line masterminds. The branding's better, but this stuff's going on anyway. So I don't have as much as a problem with it as, I always ask coaches, because I probably told you this story when Jordan Mailata was developing, and the AAF was still around, the Alliance of American Football. They were trying to, and it was all bull bleed, but they were trying to say they wanted to be a developmental arm for the NFL. And I think it was Damo actually who asked Jeff Stoutland about Jordan Mailata. Would he consider, hey, more reps? He always says reps are like bars of gold, Stoutland says. You get more reps, and he's like, I don't want anybody touching Jordan Mailata. I don't want anybody. He built this kid up from ground zero, truly. Never played a down of football at any level. Didn't know how to play it, put on his helmet, I always say. From ground up. And he was like, I don't want anybody else touching Jordan Mailata, teaching him bad habits that I'm trying to get out of him or whatever. And I always thought to myself, that makes sense. But then you have this all over the league. And I constantly ask Shane Steichen, I ask Nick Sirianni, I ask everybody. And part of it is there's nothing you can do about it. But clearly the Eagles steered Jalen Hurts in a specific direction. And it's, they don't do that often. And it's usually, obviously, quarterback's the most important position. But, there is something to insert name, Devontae Smith or whoever you want to say, who's he working with in the offseason? That could hurt you. It could help you, but it could hurt you as well, especially when it comes to technique and the coaching staff and what Philadelphia wants you to do. But the coaches are kind of like, well, there's nothing we can do about it. So they kind of default to stay in shape. And, if something develops, if a bad habits develops, well, you got to change it back, do the best you can. There's not much you can do, really.
John, if you know, please tell me and our listeners. If you don't, I'm going to ask you to speculate here. Jalen Hurts putting in work this offseason with these quarterback gurus out on the West Coast, Tom House and Rod Dado. You said the Eagles probably pushed him in that direction, advised him in that direction. I don't think they could go mandate him in that direction, but they had influence over him. Who do you think's paying their tab? Because they're charging. They're not doing it out of the goodness of their heart. Somebody's writing a check to somebody. Who do you think's paying?
Now that you said that, I've never really thought about it before. Maybe I'll look into that, because there is some there now, in the case of Tom and Adam, they've been doing it for a long time. So, but there is something to, if you're sort of one of these personal tutors, to be able to say, hey, I'm working with Jalen Hurts, or I'm working with so-and-so. That elevates your sort of your own personal brand in the NFL world. So there is sort of that give and take. But there's certain guys, and I would put Tom House in that category, who are so entrenched that they're in demand.
They get paid.
Yeah, I assume they get paid. And I would assume if the Eagles steered them in that direction, they were picking up the tab. But I don't know that for a fact. And it's going to be very hard to find out, because the Eagles won't even admit they sent him there, because there's all this sensitivity who Jalen was working with before, and you don't want to upset him, and everything's about politics, Jody. It's ludicrous.
The only way you're going to find out is on the House end.
Yeah. And Tom will not, by the way, Tom will not ever tell anyone who he's working with. So it always has to come from the player.
Okay.
Always has to come from the player.
Maybe Jalen's agent would be willing to give you an off-the-record indication as to who got compensated.
He was working with Tom House, so...
Understood, but the question I asked was,
I don't know who's paying Tom.
Who's paying for it?
Because and it's more Adam Dadu, by the way. Adam Dadu, who used to pitch for the Dodgers. He's sort of taken over. Tom's getting a little bit older, so Adam does more of the heavy lifting these days.
No, whichever one it is, somebody worked with Jalen Hurts, and we'll see if it improved his game. At least according to some, like John McMullen, who got a chance to see him in the 2 sessions, less than an hour and 45 minutes of 7-on-7s that you got to see.
Got about an hour and 45 minutes this spring. It's a new world, Jody. It's a new world.
But some people could tell that Jalen Hurts was throwing the ball significantly better, tighter spirals, more zip on it than there was before. In an hour and 45 minutes of workouts that did not include anyone coming after him, trying to make his life a living heck by pressuring him. But we can tell that much. I could tell different. Now, I wasn't even there. If I was there for the hour and 45 minutes, I still don't think I could tell anything. But since I wasn't there, I probably shouldn't be.
I'll correct you. I'll correct you on one thing. Stationary tackling dummies were bearing down on Jalen Hurts.
Stationary. Thank you very much for that word picture. Stationary tackling dummies coming after the quarterback. Man, it must have had him just staining his pants. I hope he comes back and has a great season. I like the guy. I liked him at Alabama. I liked the pick when the Eagles made it. And I am a guy who believes that you can improve your accuracy over time. At some point, you just say, no, it is what it is. But with Jalen Hurts having been, how many games did he start? 4 at the tail end of 2020? All right, and he missed 2 games last year. So a 19-game starter in the National Football League. I surely believe there's still room for improvement. I think he can become more accurate, and he's going to need to be this year, because for me, that was his biggest downfall last year, was inaccuracy throwing the football. I absolutely can believe that it can happen. Will it happen? I'm not going to judge off an hour and 45 minutes of tackling, stable.
Well,
tackling.
Josh Allen proves it can happen. Doesn't happen often, but you can improve. I mean, everybody improves. There's multiple ways to improve, and one of the ways is just more experience, and you become more comfortable in the offense, and things slow down for you. And this is, the Eagles and Jalen himself make a big deal out of this. Will be the first time he's in the same offense for 2 consecutive years since high school. All that stuff is going to help. And then, as we talked about with Jared before, A.J. Brown. And all of a sudden, A.J. Brown's out there with Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert. And you got a good, in theory, on paper, you got a good safety valve in Kenny Gainwell. Plenty of weapons now. Great offensive line. There's no reason you shouldn't expect improvement from Jalen Hurts. The bigger question to me is it going to be enough improvement? And that's the bigger question.
And John McMullen, don't forget, the new and improved, returning from tight end Dallas Goedert, as a big part of the Eagles offense this upcoming year, because Kittle and Kelsey will be sharing all their secrets on being phenomenal Pro Bowl level.
And Greg Olsen, don't forget Greg. He's retired, but Greg,
is he going to help him with his broadcast capabilities? Will they get Goddard up to speed for broadcasting?
Greg, I think Greg's doing the Super Bowl this year. He's going to be the number one guy, the number one analyst, I believe.
Right. I hope he has a great year, because I think the year after Tom Brady will be sitting in his chair.
Yeah.
So, good for Greg Olsen that he'll be doing tight end much longer than he'll be doing Super Bowl broadcasts for Fox.
Great timing though, because Fox happens to have the Super Bowl the year he's in the number one chair. That's great timing.
Yeah, good for him. He's going to be able to tell his grandkids, I called the Super Bowl someday.
By the way, we're talking about Patrick Mahomes. I want to give myself, and I want to give Patrick credit, and I want to give myself a pat on the back before we get to break. I'm sure you saw this. He said yesterday that the second half versus the Bengals, worst playoff football I've ever played.
Right.
I give him credit. I give him credit for that. He was also bad against Tampa Bay in the Super Bowl, but that was more of his offensive. He lost his offensive tackles. They were just talk
about being under duress.
Yeah,
he was as distressed a quarterback in the Super Bowl as I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, but I give him credit for saying that. I always say, people say, like I'll tell you right now, I just said it with Jared, and we all said it. Best quarterback in the NFL, but that doesn't mean he's perfect. And that's
he was bad in that second half. I'm not going to blame the Super Bowl against him. I think you said earlier on the show here, he hasn't been getting it done in the playoffs, which is a little bit of an overstatement. He had a bad half.
No, I said at times in the playoffs. He's had some of the greatest playoff games ever.
Right.
At times in the playoffs, he's played very poorly. He's played poorly in both Super Bowls, except for one quarter, essentially. And then the Cincinnati game, he was a disaster in the second half. Disaster. And I'm glad he said it. That's all. I'm glad he admitted. So now when freezing cold takes comes to me, I can point to, he said it. Patrick Mahomes said it.
He was bad. There's no question about that. He had a chance to win a game against Cincinnati. He didn't do it, plain and simple. But his career stands for what it is. And
I call him the best quarterback in football. Well,
if you have a Super Bowl that you win and you play well during a period of it, I'm going to forget everything that happened before. You play lousy in the first half, you come back, you win in the second half. Guess what? The first half didn't really happen.
Well, people forget you can play completely lousy, as Ben Roethlisberger proves, and people forget
which Mahomes didn't. He won the game.
Yeah, he did win the game.
He put them in a deficit position up until a point, and then he outdid what he had done earlier. So that's a major W for me. but both John McMullen and Patrick Mahomes agree on Patrick Mahomes playing lousy against the Cincinnati Bengals. Yes.
Second half, he was great in the first half, which was so weird. He had a phenomenal first half, and then it was the one play, and
Right
he just
before
totally
half.
lost it. Yeah. It was unbelievable. He was phenomenal, and then just a disaster.
Marcus Hayes from the Philadelphia Inquirer and WIP is going to join us next, round out the week here on Birds 365.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Android TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
The big story on that. Can you
search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today?
In Philadelphia, we celebrated the miracle with pride only 5 years ago. And then the following morning, IBEW Local 98 members went back to work, building this city, rescuing our communities from decay, and inspiring the young men and women of the region to take pride in who we are. Like the Cats, Local 98 members believe in hope.
To learn more about who we are, what we do, and career opportunities with Local 98, visit us, IBEW98.org.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass. Free.
What's that?
A rocks glass?
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Holy shit. Glass is for cocktails, right?
It's for this, this, and that.
Is the length of the glass equal to your...
You betcha.
But is it made out of...
glass?
Okay, but is the rip...
smooth?
Will you stop doing...
that?
I'm the professional here.
And you're telling me I can get one of these glasses for free?
That's right. One free rocks glass per customer with each first-time purchase of Stateside Vodka. All from the company that's highly awarded. 0 carbs, 0 sugar, and deliciously tasting vodka. So good, it just disappears.
Football Friday here on Birds 365. Hopefully we can get us all punched up at once here in our shot. You got John McMullen, Jody McDonald here with you. And joining us, you can see the top of his head. Look at him. He's working hard to get on camera. God bless him. There he is.
There we go.
The ink-stained wretch himself, our buddy Marcus Hayes from the Philadelphia Inquirer and WIP. All right, Marcus, now we got you in focus. Where did you go to? Amazon or directly to PhiladelphiaEagles.com to order your Eagle paraphernalia, memorabilia, call it what you want, with their new word. What is it called again?
Word mark.
Word mark.
The big shipped. And
yesterday.
Secondary logos.
Make any purchases yet, Marcus?
No, we try to keep our house free of any sort of paraphernalia.
Good for you, Mark.
That would imply that I have a bias. But, people ask all the time. I get so frustrated. Why do they keep changing the uniform, and why are they going to Kelly Green, and why did they change what is it called, the word mark?
Word mark.
Yeah. So you buy new stuff. That's
exactly. Why does nobody get that? I said the same. It's all a merchandising grab. I'm surprised. Here's what I'm surprised about, Marcus. I'm surprised the NFL long ago didn't become Oregon, Nike University. They change uniforms whenever they want, whenever they feel like, and people buy them and they say, "Oh, that's cool," and do it. I'm surprised, not just the NFL, but more professional sports teams don't open the floodgates completely and say, "Okay, we're going to wear this on this day, and we're going to wear this," and just keep bleeding people dry as long as they can. I'm surprised that part of it hasn't happened.
Well, that assumes that they'll fall for the trick every time. And, I've talked to marketing people about this for probably 25 years now, because my contention is if you buy a jersey in 1995, it should still be relevant in 2022. And it often isn't. So the explanation that I've gotten is that people will fall for it every so often. And the calculus becomes, how often can we do it? So I reckon they're doing it as often as they think they can.
Exactly.
Well, and to follow up on that, Marcus, about the only thing I can say Daniel Snyder's done right over the past 15, 20 years, when he was forced to finally change the name, he went with Washington football team for two years. I always maintained he's going to double dip on merchandising. And then he comes up with the Commanders and he says, we magically, after this 2-year process, it took him to come up with Commanders. No, they're trying to double dip in merchandising. That was it. And from a business standpoint, it makes sense.
Well, yeah, and it just informs you, kind of what a horrible scumbag Daniel Snyder is, that he will fleece his own populace again, to make something, let's understand what happened with the transformation from the Redskins. He was pressured into doing it after swearing he would never do it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And then he monetized it twice. Now, if he had come up with some sort of astounding crowdsourced name and, had a competition and, you paid to submit your thing and you paid to submit your name and the proceeds went to charity, then you ought to take 10 years to do it. I don't care. But he clearly, as you said, John, double dipped, because really the only thing that most NFL owners care about is making as much money and increasing the value of their commodity as much as they can. They really don't care about winning that much. They not nearly as much as they care about worth and profit. So he is he cares least about winning of any owner I've ever been around who's not a corporation. The corporate guys really don't care about anything but that stuff. But Snyder is it's almost like he's a parody of a pro sports owner. You couldn't
by the way, he might put a couple extra bucks into his own pocket, which isn't going to go well with his band of fellow owners in the National Football League, and that may be what gets him kicked out of the club. All right, Marcus, do want to ask you about the Eagles on the football field, even though they're not on the football field. There are a whole bunch of teams around the National Football League that are on the football field this week. The Eagles scaled back subscribing to the less is more, stay healthier, more important than getting actual work and practice in. Are they smarter than everybody else, or is this a misdirection that they're throwing out there?
They point to the decrease in soft tissue injuries from 2021 and say, we scaled back last off season and look what it brought us. Well, there were no off-season activities in 2020, and they were as injured as ever. So the evidence from 2021 is an outlier, whereas they've tried it both ways in the past, and they've gotten as hurt as ever. So, excuse me, I don't know who they hired to endorse this theory that less is more. But if I were a physiologist or a doctor or an athletic trainer, I would not want to stake my reputation on hey, you know what? The less we practice in June and May is going to have a direct correlation to how healthy we are in January, because that assumes that nothing is going to happen between May and January. I thought that it was really smart to practice less and more intensely during the season last year and during training camp, but to have fewer sessions and fewer reps with a young quarterback, a remade wide receiver core, and, a guy in J.J. Arcega-Whiteside who's changing positions, assuming he plays tight end from wide receiver is, it's insanity. So I just can't wait for them to go to Detroit and lose by a touchdown and say it was the refs.
It is interesting because most of the league, most coaches, and will complain that they don't have enough time, right, in the offseason, Marcus, compared to how it used to be, and we don't get to spend as much time with the players, blah, blah, blah. And you have 13 sessions, and the Eagles use 6 of them. 6, not even 50%. So they're clearly an outlier. And Nick Sirianni doesn't strike me as the first football coach in the history of the world that says, oh, I don't want to practice. So to me, it's pretty evident that this is an organizational decision. And the Eagles talk up Arsh Denoda, their chief medical officer, and he's a star in the organization's eyes. But I look at it this way. If you put Arsh in Kansas City, he might advise the same thing, but Andy Reid's going to say, well, thanks. Okay, we're going to use our 13 sessions. New England, Bill Belichick's going to say thanks, but we're going to do it this way. Nick Sirianni obviously doesn't have that cachet. You think that becomes a problem at some point if they keep sort of that overriding hand on Nick Sirianni moving forward?
Yeah, we saw the issue in Philadelphia. We saw the issue of a general manager having too much say for 5 years with the Phillies, when Matt Klentak, who had no business being a general manager to begin with, would help make out the lineups and predetermined strategies. So yeah, there's no good that can come from taking a coach's ability to coach away, and it translates to a diminishment of power in the locker room. If the Philadelphia Eagles believe that Howie Roseman is setting their practice schedule, they have less respect for Nick Sirianni. And that's a huge problem.
That could play out that way. All right. Speaking of power and shifting, it came out a couple of weeks ago that Shane Steichen's going to be calling the plays for the Philadelphia Eagles. And Shane Steichen called the plays for the Philadelphia Eagles last year in the second half of the season, unbeknownst to most of us. John and I are both okay with this. John likes CEO coaches, guys who keep an eye on both sides of the ball rather than being more heavy-handed on one of the two. It doesn't usually happen with a second-year coach, and if we're to believe what we're told, mid-season of a first-year coach that you've already given up responsibility of play calling. Is this good going forward for the Philadelphia Eagles or bad, Marcus?
I think any head coach that calls their own plays is clearly understaffed. If you can't find a guy to be your offensive coordinator who you trust to be on the same page with you and call plays, and you have veto power, right? You've got the headset on too.
True.
But this is not something you should be involved in. You've got the officials, you've got the clock, you've got the defense, you've got specialty, you've got a lot of things to be in charge of. If you're willing to delegate everything else to just be the play caller, then you're not a head coach. So I've always believed that play calling head coaches were flawed in theory and practice. Very, very seldom does it work. And, Andy Reid has relinquished those responsibilities, for certain situations in the past. So, yeah, I'm very much a proponent of not having the head coach call the plays because there's too much to do on a football sideline. For us, a football game is kind of boring, right? There's these stoppages. Yeah. Those stoppages are when he's working.
Right.
There are way more stoppages than there are actual plays. So he's working way more often. And then he has to watch the plays. So yeah, it's always a dumb idea. I've never been a proponent of that. I will say though, it's interesting that Nick Sirianni admitted in a very detailed manner the things he was missing, the reason he relinquished play calling, and like the more so not just the play calling, because a lot of the mechanics of the play calling happens when the defense is on the field. You figure out what you're going to call next, and you figure out where you're going to get the ball, and you have a menu of plays for certain situations. And you can't pay attention to what's going on in the game. And he admitted that. He said, you know what? I couldn't pay attention to what was going on in the game. I need to be more of as John said, a CEO and less of a senior vice president.
Yeah, it's always interesting because I've talked about this for years, Marcus, and Sean McVay is kind of the guy in the NFL right now as a head coach. Everybody's looking for Sean McVay. Everybody who ever had a cup of coffee with Sean McVay can get an interview. And when Sean was obviously very young, still very young, and he got the job in Los Angeles, he hired Wade Phillips, which I thought was a great move as a guy who's coached everywhere and great defensive mind. But he used to literally go sit on the bench with Jared Goff at the time when the defense was on. He wasn't paying attention at all. And I would say this is a glorified, whatever you want to call it, super offensive coordinator, right? There's two co-head coaches, Sean McVay on offense, Wade Phillips on defense, and one is just talks to the media. That's the difference.
Right. Yeah.
Why do you think most owners have been slow to figure this out? Because they tend to go I want the offensive play caller. I want the hot guy. I want Kyle Shanahan. I want the next Sean McVay. I want Kevin O'Connell, who got a job this offseason as Sean McVay's sort of next to the throne. Why do you think so many owners haven't figured that out?
Most owners are not very smart. Most owners are not very good managers of people. Most owners are intimidated by the football side of football. So if you get a young, hot candidate, and what are there, 2, 3 every year, maybe really just one, and he says, these are my terms. Well, you don't really know what's going on the sideline. The only guy who has any real semblance of an idea of what it's like to be in and around football, for better or worse, is Jerry Jones, who hires horrible coaches. But that said, you're talking about 32 decision makers or 31 decision makers who don't know what the job is. So you can tell them anything you want, and you can point to the outliers that do work without qualifying it. So, and what happens, the reason leagues are copycat leagues is because the people making the ultimate decisions aren't innovators, they're copiers. And every once in a while, somebody, we thought the Chip Kelly model might work. We thought that the NFL was going to turn into Oregon, right? Well, it didn't, but all the owners did. All the owners started running a version of that type of offense. So they don't really know what they're doing. And that's not necessarily limited to football, but you'll find in hockey, the owners aren't hiring the head coaches, the hockey guys are. In baseball, it used to be the GM would hire the manager. Now it's like 50-50. But in football, almost always the owner hires the head coach, which is insane. It's just crazy. Why would you who essentially know more about football than the three of us sitting here, stake your $5 billion business on a guy you can't accurately evaluate?
Answer, 1 word, 3 letters, ego. But that's your point is well taken, Marcus. All right. Something near and dear to the football fans here in Philadelphia. Aggressive defense. A lot of people say Jonathan Gannon wasn't aggressive last year, and in explaining it, say, well, he might not have had the weapons that he needed to be able to run the defense that he wanted. Well, they added defensive weapons during this offseason in Jordan Davis and Hassan Reddick and the Kobe Dean and James Bradbury, they really did bring in talent upgrades at key positions for them this offseason. If we define aggressive defense by bringing 5 men on a rush and playing man-to-man on the outside on pass coverage, and those are the two main things. What else can you do to be a more aggressive defense? Those are the two things. Will we see a more aggressive Eagles defense this year with Jonathan Gannon because he's gotten the weapons that he needs?
Well, it's really interesting, and I don't mean to be critical of you guys. And I was guilty of this for much of the season and the offseason as well. Who made the most important play in the Super Bowl?
Brandon Graham.
Who didn't play last year?
Brandon Graham.
Who had their best season in 2020? 2020.
Brandon, one of his best seasons. Brandon's been good for a long time, but I hear what you're saying.
He went to the Pro Bowl.
Yeah.
So you subtracted arguably the best defensive player from your defense. I think it was the beginning of the second game, John.
Yeah, I think it was week 3, but beginning of week 3. Yeah.
So you subtracted and probably the most versatile, because Brandon does a lot of things and a huge leader in that locker room. So I believe that they were caught sort of with their pants down and they misevaluated Josh Sweat. Josh Sweat was kind of a bust last year. I know he had good numbers at the end of the year, but he was largely a non-factor. So it depends.
Hold on. If you're going to call Josh Sweat a bust, what is Derek Barnett?
I cut Derek Barnett before last season. I thought they were crazy giving him money.
They gave Josh $40 million. You got to criticize Howie for giving Josh 40.
Yeah, but I didn't think they should have picked up Barnett's option. He had a 5th-year option for $10 million, I think it was, and I thought that was a bad deal.
Yeah.
Josh, I could see because he was ascending.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And his brother's really good. So, or not his brother.
Not his brother's brother. Yeah, Montez, his brother in name. Montez.
Yes, right. His brother in name is really good. Maybe they got confused like I did. But yeah, it depends, Jody, on which 5 you're bringing. And I think last year they just misevaluated that position and didn't have the depth that they thought they had behind it. So, and I'm not a big Jonathan Gannon fan. I didn't find him to be particularly innovative. I thought that he misused guys like, and I know Jannard Avery's not the be all and end all, but when he started using him properly, they were more effective. And, I'm not so sure how much I trust this secondary as much as I trust the front 7 or, however they 6, 5, however many they put up there to sort of bring pressure. But the biggest issue for this team was and remains, can they cover tight ends and running backs and slots? And I don't see any big improvement there. I don't know that they have the linebackers or the nickel corner to take away the soft underbelly. And that's where they were vulnerable last year. And I think it's where they're going to be vulnerable this year.
Marcus, you mentioned when we were talking about coaches, you mentioned there's more copiers than innovators. And this league is known as a copycat league. One thing I see from JG is he wants to run Vic Fangio's defense. Why did people get away with, whoever it is? Could be Tony Dungy back in the day. Could be put Pete Carroll in the cover 3 with Seattle and the Legion of Boom. Now it's Vic Fangio. 35% of the league is going to run his scheme. Why are people not searching for these innovators? Why aren't they? In other words, if you want to run Vic Fangio, he's unemployed. He's taking a year off. Go get Vic Fangio. Why do we have all these Xerox machines in the NFL?
The types of defenses you just described were organically conceived to match the personnel that was there at the time and that they replaced. Tony Dungy could run Vic Fangio's defense right now because he's Tony Dungy. Vic Fangio could run Tony Dungy's defense right now because he's Vic Fangio if the personnel made it necessary. Genius is rare. Courage is rare. So my answer to your question is, when you are the type of coach that I believe Jonathan Gannon is, where you have a board where you put pegs in there and you'll try to force the round pegs into the square hole until you get round pegs, there's no genius in that. There's really no organic development. The brilliance of, the guy I guess we all respect so much from Andy Reid's defenses was that he didn't have a defense. He used what he had in front of him year to year to year, and you couldn't say that it was a blank defense. It was a blank defense. So, the best defensive innovators innovate with what's in front of them. I mean, Brian Dawkins, the most remarkable component about Brian Dawkins was he could turn into a nickel corner. And then you saw a lot of defensive coordinators trying to emulate that, right? Turn their strong safety into a nickel corner. Well, he was Brian Dawkins, and that was the difference in those defenses versus other schemes. And Brian could blitz from that slot. So you had, a very, very, there aren't many Cam Chancellors out there. There aren't many Brian Dawkinses. But when you get them, you create a defense that uses their strengths best. And that's what the best defensive coordinators do. And that's why I like defensive coordinators better than offensive coordinators, because to follow them and sort of dissect what they do, because there's no play. You know what I mean? In an offense, you have to run every play has to be run precisely without any sort of innovation. Defense is all improvisation.
True. It's about reacting. All right, then let me ask you this, and I don't want to compare anybody on this Eagle defense to Brian Dawkins. I don't think that would be fair to this current Eagle defense or any of the players on it. But if there is a guy on defense this year that can, sounds like you're not a Gannon fan, despite Gannon's defense being what it is, he's going to be so talented and so good and so presumptive to figure stuff out ahead of time and react better than the offense lays it out. Who's that guy on defense for the Eagles this year? Who's going to be the guy who overachieves what Jonathan Gannon's defense needs him to do?
Who's going to be the Javon Hargrave this year, you mean? Probably Hassan Reddick. He's going to benefit from Javon Hargrave, Jordan Davis, Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, and Sweat to a degree. And he's going to see a lot of opportunities to come disguised because they're listing him as a linebacker, right? So, he's the guy that's going to, he's going to catch my eye all the time. He could have a Von Miller type year. You know what I mean? Especially now that they have two corners who can cover. And let's be honest, these guys aren't, anybody's island. They're very, very good cornerbacks, and they can cover. They'll break up passes. They'll make plays. If you're facing some of the quarterbacks they're going to be facing, they might make a lot of plays. But I think Hassan Reddick could hit double-digit sacks, 13 games in.
At Inkstained Wretch, Marcus Hayes, read him at inquirer.com. You can listen to him on WIP. I'll leave it here with you, Marcus, because you mentioned Brian Dawkins, and we all saw the versatility of Malcolm Jenkins for years. You mentioned some other great safeties, Cam Chancellor. The one thing the Eagles seem to be missing on paper is a safety. Anthony Harris, Marcus Epps kind of penciled in. Does that limit the ceiling of their defense? The fact that it's the one thing it seems that Howie Roseman hasn't addressed as we speed towards training camp.
For an organization that has existed during Howie's tenure with two, I think Malcolm Jenkins is a Hall of Fame safety, with two Hall of Fame caliber safeties of extremely high character who they had to pay. It's astonishing that he has spent so little equity on shoring up that part of the roster. So yeah, it's a real issue, I'm intrigued to see if they aren't interested in converting one or two of their 467 cornerbacks to safety during training camp. I think Zach McPherson, correct me if I'm wrong, John, he kind of profiles as a safety to a degree. But yeah, I've been a little confounded by all the assets spent on the defensive line, especially, and not on players that actually keep the ball out of the end zone. And it's been kind of chronic, I mean, I was never a big Rodney McLeod fan. I thought Malcolm was spectacular and covered up a lot of those sins. But, just because you spend money on the position doesn't mean that it's money well spent. And they've really struggled at that spot the last 2 or 3 years. And it seems to be the blind, linebacker and safety seem to be his blind spots. And he's a very good general manager. We can't argue that. But yeah, it's a pretty significant concern, especially when you play the better quarterbacks who can manipulate the safeties.
Yeah.
That to me is when they're going to play a bad schedule. They're going to play a lot of bad quarterbacks, and they're going to play a diminished like Dallas offense, right? So it won't be as glaring, and maybe that's how he's calculus. Maybe I can address it next year because I can get by this year, because he did address a lot of things. So, but yeah, it's a real concern, and I love to watch the safeties before the snap. But the last 2 years, the safeties haven't been asked to or been able to do a lot before the snap because they're kind of petrified. They're kind of paralyzed. So, with two different defensive coordinators. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And honestly, it probably won't matter until if and when they reach the playoffs, when the quarterbacks that they play will be better equipped to manipulate those safeties.
My theory is he's down on the Eagles safeties, Mr. Hayes is, because they've got a guy named Epsy who's going by Epsy, not Marcus. So that he just doesn't like being disrespected. That would be my guess. Why he's down on the safeties.
Marcus on Marcus crime, man. We
Marcus, we appreciate when you jump aboard with us. Bring your crime to us anytime, my friend. Thank you much. We'll get you on when we get a little closer to the opening of camp. Appreciate it. Having a good weekend, big guy.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Marcus.
Marcus Hayes, Philadelphia Inquirer and WIP. Marcus on Marcus crime. Love it. All right. Mac on Mac crime coming back. McDonald and McMullen got to put a bow on this show and this week here on Birds 365.
Go for the pulls and the pools. Go for the oohs and the ahs. Go for the bubbles and the bubbly. Go for the story and the stories. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass.
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
At Action News, we cherish every moment, and it's our profound responsibility to bring you closer to your world. Never miss a moment. Trust the people at Action News.
All right, did you know I was the Mommy Slam Dunk Champion?
Really?
Yes, really, don't sound so surprised.
Let's see it.
Oh, you're ready. All right, here we go. Let's hear the crowd. So go to right, I go to left, fake 'em out. Mama, go up.
She did it.
Again? You can't avoid gravity, but United Healthcare can help you avoid financial surprises by helping you compare costs and doctor quality ratings. United Healthcare.
Uh-huh. Go for the midnight dares. Go for the game. Go for the hits. Go for the fans. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
You got McMullen and McDonald. Let's a bow on the show and the week here on Birds 365. Not without thanking our two guests, Jared Dubin, who was on with us hour number one, who did a good job covering not only the Eagles, but the entire National Football League. And thanks to our bud, Marcus Hayes, who just hopped on. I love whenever we have Marcus on because I guarantee you after he's over and done with, he'll say something that I blatantly agree with, that I say, damn, he's right about that. And something that I woefully disagree with, that I think he's just
I got that
about.
too. I got that. What was yours? That not the agreeing part, the disagreeing part.
The disagreeing part that the Eagles did nothing to improve on the ability to cover tight ends and guys out of the backfield. I think Maddox is one of the best cover corners, slot corners in the National Football League. And maybe I'm too big a fan, but I think Nakobe Dean is going to step in, grab the job, be able to cover guys out of the backfield. I think
Kaiser
they did
White
address
as
it, and
well.
I don't think it's one of their weaknesses.
Kaiser White as well can cover.
Yes.
Yeah. Mine, Jody, Josh Sweat, man.
Yeah,
Josh
he's a little
Sweat's
harsh on Josh. I
Josh
agree with
Sweat's
that.
a good player. I don't think the Eagles made a mistake even a little bit with that extension. I think they got a good deal. I think they got a really cost-effective deal on Josh Sweat. I think he's a good football player. Now, I agree with Marcus that people, kind of missed that Brandon Graham injury, how much that affected the Eagles last year. That's where him and I are in lockstep
Same
there.
here.
But Josh Sweat's a good football player. I might have to write about that at JAKIBsports.com.
There you go.
This weekend. Got to get JAKIBsports.com in there. You can.
So you got two ideas today. Underrated Josh Sweat, and who the hell paid the tab for Jalen Hurts to go out to the West Coast and learn how to play quarterback?
Yeah, wow.
We got two columns written for you today, McMullen.
Oh, believe me, I get ideas all the time from this show, Jody. I'm a content machine. I gotta come up with ideas. The show helps immensely. Now Tone is saying Josh Sweat was underwhelming. What the hell is going on here?
Okay, well,
what is going on?
You got a good column coming up this weekend, and when in doubt, crowdsource.
It's all about sacks with these people. All about sacks. I'm looking at you, Tone. Not everything's about sacks.
You can look at me because I put heavy emphasis on sacks too. I think.
By the way, he led the Eagles in sacks, tied with Javon Hargrave. But I digress.
And you can get a pressure that ends in a 65-yard touchdown. So there is no perfect way to judge a given play pressure on a quarterback. There is just one. That is the sack. There's no downside to a sack, even though I know you can.
There's no downside whatsoever.
Down the Chris Long pressure led to an interception.
But I always end it with there is no downside to a sack. Yeah. Although. Yeah, I always go to the Chris Long play.
Yeah, you do. I'm surprised I had to go there for you.
Because
you didn't get there quick enough.
What would you rather have, the Chris Long play or a run-in-the-mill sack that makes you punt the football?
Understood. That's a 1 in every 1,000 plays type play, but it actually had a better ending than a sack would have. Yes, I get that. All right, McMullen, have yourself a good weekend. I'm going to be back here on Monday. Tone's going to be back here second guessing you on Monday. Are you going to be back here on Monday?
I'm going to be back here. Until then, JAKIBsports.com. You can see all the interviews, watch all the shows on JAKIB Media. Not only us, Birds 365, the Sports Take guys, Dan Cilio, the National Football Show. And you can read me, JAKIBsports.com.
He'll be there this weekend because McMullen's already working on his next 2 columns that he figured out during the show today. He'll put them up over the weekend. And then John and I will be back with Birds 365 in 2 and 2 days, that is.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate, inside the locker room, and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.